All right, well, it is officially 9 o'clock by my computer, so we'll go ahead and kick things off. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Dubay. I'm with Tetra Tech. I'm the moderator for this session, and Liz Hyatt is with me from Tetra Tech, and she'll be able to help anybody who may have any technical issues during the session, but we won't have any, so we'll give Liz a boring ride for this session. You are in minimum control measure 3, which is illicit discharge detection and elimination. We have two presenters with us today. We have Eric Maines from the Hanover Borough, and we have Nathan Walker with us from Gannett Fleming. And I just want to remind folks to please mute yourself, to leave your cameras off to help with bandwidth issues, to put any questions you may have for the presenters into the chat, and I will scan them and give them to our presenters when they're done with their presentation. And feel free to also use those emojis in there if you want to, give some positive feedback to our presenters, or if you need to go back over anything at any point in the presentation. And with that, I will hand it over to our presenters. Thanks so much for being here with us today and volunteering your time.
Sure. So I'll start off again. My name is Nathan Walker with Gannett Fleming, and Eric. So I'm going to give you the first kind of the introductory slides, and then Eric is going to talk about his real world experience in Hanover Borough there in York County. You are engaged. You are signed in for the most exciting presentation. We're going to really set the bar high for Eric and I. Well, Eric's going to have to finish this off, but you're engaged in the most exciting presentation of the morning. You picked the right one. IDDE. What the heck does that mean, right? MCM 3. Working in the water resources industry, working around EPA, they always tell you how effective you are by how many acronyms you use. And we probably might have the most in our session, but let's get rid of the acronyms. Let's kind of push those aside. We know what a minimum control measure is. Illicit discharge detection and elimination, best management practice. We're going to use those terms, but we're going to try to avoid those as much as we can, because your role working in your municipalities is really to talk about your job keeping water clean. And what it all comes down to, all these sessions that you're listening to today and tomorrow, it's all about just keeping water clean, no matter what the acronyms are, no matter what the regulations are, no matter what the policies are. We're trying to keep water clean. So if someone asks you, or you're communicating to your staff or the people that are doing the inspections, or your hotline for illicit discharge, we're trying to keep water clean, and we're making sure that what comes out of the pipe when it's not raining is safe for the environment. And even better, there's no water coming out of the pipe when it's not raining. So let's kind of keep that high level. We're trying to keep water clean. So minimum control measure 3. Well, let's give you an introduction for where Hanover Borough is. And slide. There we go. This is York County. The Susquehanna River is on the right side. Hanover Borough is on the left side. You can see the York County Planning Commission considers Hanover Borough to be an established primary growth area. So there's a lot of development. If any guesses on I was surprised, working through with Hanover, but there are almost 16,000 people living there. So it's a pretty big population center there in York County with 16,000 folks. So it's a lot of history, a lot of old infrastructure, a lot of old land use, and a pretty dynamic land use pattern. So why is MS4 mapping important? And this is where it is pretty cool. I go to different conferences or moderate different sessions. And at the end of the session, we always ask individuals or participants, what do you want to hear more about? And most of the time, those session evaluation forms come back and say, we want to hear more about mapping, because people want to know what's on the ground. People want to know themselves better. They want to know what their network looks like. They want to be able to interact with their network. They want to understand how the infrastructure is set up. But specifically, why is MS4 mapping important? We found we're going to work under these 4 bullets. One, it shows a connection between the MS4 and the receiving stream. So if there is a pollution event, you can trace that storm sewer upstream and figure out, all right, these are the likely sources of where this pollution's coming from. Whether that pollution is sewage, whether that pollution is um, discharge from a cement truck that's washing out into the storm drain, whether that pollution is an industrial hookup, whether it's just a septic system or not a septic, a sump pump that's connected to the storm drain. But it allows you to trace it and look back upstream. It's the foundation for your inspection program. So think about this: if you have 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 outfalls, you want to know a good map that is a point on a map, but wouldn't it be great if it was a really specific location for where that outfall is so that your staff, your personnel, your consultants, your inspectors are going out there and they're going right to the outfall at the right location, and they're not trying to hunt through the bushes to try to find it. It's also helps you define really what your outfalls are. I've worked with MS4 permittees on a very flat landscape where we've had hundreds of outfalls, and by the time you're looking at it, they came down with 8. So by it really minimized the number of places they need to inspect and made their program much easier to manage because they were saying, nope, that's an outfall and that's not. We're going to focus on what really meets the definition of an outfall. So mapping allows you to make decisions about each point. Is it an outfall? Do we need to inspect it? Doesn't matter. Forms a critical component of your infrastructure maintenance program. So storm sewer is gaining attention. Storm sewer pipes. Um, think about your sanitary sewer system. A lot of folk, the operators of that system know how old each pipe is, what that pipe's made out of, what size that pipe is. They know when they're going to replace it. It's on a life cycle. They're gonna change it out eventually. Not so much with storm sewer. And storm sewer is getting to the point where municipalities are saying we need to know more about our program. We need to know how we're maintaining it. We need to know how much time we're spending repairing it. We need to know what the life cycle is so that it doesn't collapse into the future. So a good map with the right kind of data allows you to really know what your infrastructure, how to maintain your infrastructure. And the other thing that is a little bit off of minimum control measure 3 for illicit discharge is a good map guides your efforts to address flooding. And Eric will show some interesting graphics about how, if you know the right information about your storm sewer map, it allows you to set up a model that allows you to make the right investment, the right size investment in flood mitigation. We're seeing more and more across Pennsylvania is that um, municipalities are investing in flooding at the neighborhood or the district level. You know, it's not widespread community wide, but because the infrastructure is aging, because there's more development upstream, that we need to know more about the storm sewer pipes, the size, the slope, the material, so that we can make the right investments to mitigate flooding in the neighborhood, in the district, at the neighborhood or district scale. So that's why it's important to map your MS4. All right, so specific to MCM number 3, there's 6 DEP requires 6 best management practices, and these aren't just Pennsylvania. If you go across the country, most MCM 3 responsibilities come down to these 6 BMPs in different states, and so Pennsylvania is common. This is a standard practice here in Pennsylvania. And what do you have to do? Enact a written program, map the outfalls, map the storm sewer, how it's all connected together, so you can look upstream and downstream if there's a leak, if there's a spill. Screen those outfalls is the 4th BMP, so that you actually go out and take a look at it during the permit cycle, your MS4 permit cycle, to make sure dry weather flows, or first, there are no dry weather flows, and 2, if there are dry weather flows, where's that water coming from? How dirty is it? Enact a stormwater management ordinance so that you've got enforcement power that you can say to the public, only stormwater goes into the storm sewer, right? I say that right? Only stormwater goes into the storm sewer. I've been in municipalities and boroughs where land use is tight, right? Think about think about Hanover Borough. And I'm not sure this is the case in Hanover, but it certainly is in boroughs across Pennsylvania. Some boroughs across Pennsylvania is you've got a row home or a town home, and they've got a sump pump, and that water goes where? It doesn't have much of a backyard. Does it go into the sanitary sewer? Well, there's an ordinance that says no, the water can't go into a the sump pump water can't go into a sanitary sewer from that townhome. Can it go into the storm sewer? The ordinance pretty much says no, it can't go into the storm sewer. Does it go into the backyard? Well, the backyard's not very big. So there are some interesting dynamics about when water can enter into the storm sewer. But based on the DEP standard, even some pump water, which seems to be relatively clean, can't be pushed into the storm sewer to discharge, because who knows what's in the basement? It could be discharging paint, it could be discharging solvents, it could be discharging other things to the storm sewer. But you need an ordinance that lays down the regulations, and then you go from there. As far as what can be discharged into the storm sewer, pretty much it should just be stormwater. And then the last is reach out to the public, so that if the public does see it, they're walking their dog and they see something coming out of a storm sewer, they have an opportunity they know who to call to get that investigated. On the right side, you see it's a written, dynamic, and iterative. And these are terms DEP used to use pretty frequently about what this program should look like. If DEP says if it's not written down, it didn't happen, or it doesn't happen. So your MCM3 program needs to be written down, and that allows the staff and the public to be fully aware that it's what the standard is, so it can be used. It also, if it's written down, you can judge: is it pragmatic? Is it practical? Can you implement it? Can you evaluate it? And then this last term, iterative, can you go back and review it to make sure it's working well? So this certainly applies for MCM3, that your program should be written, iterative, and dynamic. A lot of words here, but wanted just to show you in BMP number 1 of MCM3, again, water quality. These are the written program. Sticking with that first bullet, the written program should have all of these procedures in there. So it's a procedures based. It's an instruction manual for your IDDE program. And I just want you to look at the last one, record keeping. Again, I'm gonna say it again. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. If you didn't make a record of your inspection, you didn't make a record of your evaluation of what a dry weather discharge looked like, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So DEP would need you to keep those records, and how all these procedures were implemented. Just in graphic form, what do you really have to do as an
Nathan,
MS?
I hate to interrupt. There's a Cisco WebEx meeting problem report over your slide. I don't know if you can see that or if you can hit cancel.
I can find that. I see something. Hopefully I don't shut the whole thing down. Does that work?
There you go. You're good. Thank you.
Sorry. So there, all right. So back to this graphic. After you get your inspection procedures written down, and your map is correct, then go out and do those field investigations. And then how those field investigations operate: review your inspection procedures, review your MS map, then do the field inspections again. So you're going to be doing this one or two or three, I guess once or twice during the permit cycle every 5 years, going back and doing the field investigations. Make sure your inspection procedures in your MS4 map make it as efficient as possible. All this is bathed in public engagement, again, program review, and making sure you have the proper enforcement capability so that you can enter private property appropriately if you think there's a source of pollution discharging from that property through the MS4. So what does an outfall inspection look like? Well, this is page 1 of an outfall inspection. Yeah, I don't know if how many outfalls you have in your community. I've seen hundreds, I've seen dozens, but there's a lot of paper that has to go into it. So in this outfall, for every outfall, you need to take describe the outfall, what if there's dry weather flow, and evaluate it. If you do have water coming out, you're doing an analysis either in the field or at the laboratory of what that water contains. You're making observations, and then you're certifying that, yes, I was out here, I saw it, and this is what I saw. These field reports may prompt further investigation, but this is page 1. So it's a lot of paper, and if you've got, say you've got 60 outfalls, that's not uncommon. You got 60 outfalls to inspect. You're out there in the weeds, you're out there in the brush, you're hacking through to get to be able to see the outfall. You've got a camera in one hand, you've got a map in another, you've got a clipboard with this form in the other form, in your third hand. You're trying to make notations, you're trying to keep things organized, and it gets a little cumbersome. So what is the best way to collect these outfall observations? And then, the next question we're going to ask is not just for outfalls, but for your MS4 map, what is the best way to collect any infrastructure data? So you can see keep your hands free to get standardized information, to collect standard information across your system. Eric's going to go in to talk about what they're doing in Hanover. So I'm going to go on mute. Take it away, Eric.
All right, if you want to advance to the next slide there. So one of the key things that I think as Nathan and I started to talk about this presentation and what it is that we really wanted to deliver to the audience, it was really a key point that the technology that facilitates what we're suggesting that you would look at, that you would evaluate and consider as part of your MS4 program, that technology has just advanced just monumentally, and it hasn't stopped. It just continues to evolve and to grow, and the investment in it starts to offer you a platform that gives into other things. So it's not as though you're going down this rabbit hole of building this GIS solution for MCM3, and at the end of that, you're like, okay, well, I got a really cool mousetrap for dealing with MCM3. That's it. And that's absolutely not the case, because actually at the end of building a platform to deal with MCM3, as we're going to walk through, what industry tells us is now you can use that as a platform to get into other things. And that's what I think is the really cool aspect about this whole thing, is that GIS is a fantastic solution for meeting MCM3 obligations, meeting MS4 obligations, but it doesn't have to stop there. And you know, not to kind of take the cliche, but really the sky is the limit with what it is that you would use your GIS for and how you might integrate it into, you know, other pieces and other facets of your program. So if you want to advance to the next slide. So one of the very first questions that pops up often, you got a blank one there, Nathan. There we go. Can you just go ahead and throw them all one there. So one of the things that, you know, a lot of people say, well, geez, you know, I must have to invest, you know, 10, 15, 20,000 into doing something like this. It sounds, you know, it sounds labor intensive. It sounds like I got to buy a lot of toys and things like that. And again, I don't think that's the case at all. I think that when you look at building a GIS solution, whether you're building it completely in-house or whether you're using a third party to help you build that solution, it's not as big as you think it is. You know, the top right there is a picture of a little receiver that we actually use in the borough. As you see there on the thing, I mean, it's sub-meter accuracy. If I'm locating a stormwater inlet, that's perfectly fine. You know, I don't need to be down to centimeter or millimeter or survey grade accuracy with what I'm doing. I just need the ability to know that outfall, that BMP, that inlet, whatever it is that I might be looking for, 2 to 3 foot is going to get you close enough to be able to say, oh, okay, there it is. So that investment for something like that, it's about $2,500. So it's not a terribly expensive thing. Rechargeable, so you're not in them for a bunch of batteries and things. Ultimately, it's a Bluetooth connection. It hooks up to your iPad, it hooks up to your phone, it hooks up to whatever device it is that you're going to have in the field with you. So, you know, that part has gotten a lot cheaper, and you can see by the size of it. I mean, that is much smaller even than today's cell phone. So it's not a cumbersome device. I generally, when I'm out in the field with it, I throw it in my shirt pocket, and once I have the satellites connected up, and that's fine until I'm ready to use it and carry it around. The second piece is obviously you need some sort of a tablet. as if you're going to use an Esri solution, a GIS solution from Esri, who is, you know, an industry leader in this, generally the Apple products seem to work a little bit better, but certainly you can do it on Android devices. At the Borough, we have multiple iPads that we use. They're cellular enabled. That's very important because you want to have access to your maps. You want to be able to get to the mapping that you're either creating or that you've already created, and you want to pull up things to see them. Having the ability to access that data through the web, it's very important that that be cellular enabled. It can get a little funky sometimes when you get down in the brush and you're down inside a ravine or something looking for things, trying to get that connection out. But generally, I found it might take it a little bit to find it, but it's usually close enough for the purposes of what you're trying to do. And then finally, the other piece of it is the GIS platform itself. ArcGIS Online, as I mentioned, Esri is sort of the industry standard. That's the one you're going to find the most support for. But there certainly are other ones floating out there that other consultants, whether they're proprietary or whether they're just other GIS solutions. The Borough, we opted for an ArcGIS Online solution. We found that gave us the maximum amount of compatibility with not only other communities who were using similar products, but also for technical support. We needed to know that we had a provider there who could help us with. So your total investment for all these things, you know, it's probably about $5,000, maybe a little bit less than that. So it's not something where you're looking at $10,000 or $20,000 to be able to, you know, develop a solution and get out in the field. And that number I just said of around 5,000, I mean, that's also including your subscription to the GIS platform, because they do work off of an annual subscription basis. So as you build your map and as we look at this for your outfall screening and things, you will have an ongoing, once you purchase the hardware, you're still going to have an ongoing subscription cost with the GIS platform. And that's based solely on the level of how much you want out of it and how many people you're going to have use it. That's what's going to set the stage for what that cost is. But, you know, generally you can figure a basic GIS solution is going to be around 5,000. Advance to the next slide, please. So obviously what you get all those things together, you decide GIS is the solution for you, you know, you're ready to go. You're rip raring, ready to get out in the field, start collecting this data, start doing, you know, the good work of water quality. You want to be prepared. You don't want to just roll out in the field, turn on that iPad and be like, all right, cool, now what? You want to go out there with some sense. You want to go out there with a plan. One of the very first things that I'd say you want to do is build a good base map. That base map is going to help you, as Nathan said, it helps you locate where things are at. It gives you a sense of place to understanding perhaps what might be draining towards you. Certainly, as you develop an attack plan to collect the data, you want to understand, you know, am I working at the bottom of the system or am I at the top of the system? And if, you know, you want to make sure that you're kind of working methodically through your system. You don't want to just be bouncing around collecting points like, you know, driving down the road. Oh, cool, there's an inlet, let's grab it. You want to have much more of an approach to understanding how it is you're going to collect that data. That all starts with a good base map. Now, you know, generally I tell people you want to have your municipal boundaries. Certainly your neighbors would love it if you'd go out there and collect data for them, but you don't want to be spending your time collecting data that's necessarily outside of your municipality. You want a good road network. You want to be able to kind of, again, have your sense of place, have it based in the network, understanding where your system is relative to your roadways. We find a lot of times, especially for us as a very built out borough, the roadways are where a large portion of your infrastructure is. You know, we don't have those rolling fields where we have systems that we have to track down. Everything we have, and this is an actual screenshot of part of our system, it's all bound and confined by our street system. So having knowledge of knowing where that's at's good. Existing stormwater system. If you have something already, I affectionately call it the sticks and dots model even, that's completely fine. That could be of value to you to know what you're getting into, to know where your system is at. There are, you know, when I worked private consulting prior to coming to the borough here, you know, we had both kinds of clients. We had clients who kind of had an idea where everything's at, but they didn't know much more about it. They might have known where the inlets were at, but they didn't have them connected. We also had people who said, I don't have a clue. You know, we've got Joe out in Public Works and Joe's been here for 40 years. He knows where everything's at. But other than that, we don't have it mapped. So you can approach it from two different angles, but if you have it, I would suggest certainly try to get that into your mapping before you go out in the field, and then you find that you're kind of in a pattern of reviewing, locating, refining, confirming, that sort of a thing. And then finally, base map imagery. Imagery has just gotten, it's almost a bit scary how good it's gotten. You know, especially if you look at some of the data sets like PIMA's 2018 data set even, you know, you have access to high resolution imagery. You can really see, you know, you're down to a level now where you can zoom in and actually see inlets on the street, which very much helps you as you're trying to lay out your system and as you're trying to kind of lay out what it is you want to accomplish. If your system's relatively large, you're probably not going to go out there and attack the whole thing all at once. You're probably just going to take smaller sort of subsheds of it almost, go out there, collect it, come back, kind of make sure you didn't miss anything. The next day, maybe you focus on a different area, go out, look at that. But all of that comes down to if you have good base map imagery, I find that to be very, very valuable from the standpoint of helping to locate what it is you're looking at. You want to go to the next slide? So again, as I said, you don't want to just fly out there and just start collecting anything and everything under the sun. You want to be a bit more methodic about it. You want to understand a little bit about how you're going to go about collecting things and what things it is you're going to collect. That's very much a function of what it is you intend to use the data for. If you intend to only use the data for outfall screening, well, then you might not need to collect a lot of attribution data. You might not need to collect data about how deep is that inlet, what type is that inlet, what kind of top is on that inlet, whether it's a type C top or a type M top. You know, all of these things, you can focus a bit more on specific what it is you're interested in. And I think this graphic is a really good way of kind of looking at things and saying, okay, well, you know, let's see, I'm going to use this for, you know, I'm going to look at my inlets, I'm going to look at some swales. But if down the left side here you say, all right, well, I'm using this purely as my MS4 stuff, you can kind of see by the dots, that tells you a little bit what you want to collect. If you're looking to build this in the future, and I've got some other slides here that we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, growing beyond that MCM3 program, there are other things that you might want to consider setting up at the time so that you can collect them either now or in the future. And one of the topics that I saw a lot on this agenda for this particular conference is stormwater fee development. You know, whether it's communities that already have them or communities that are considering them, your mapping becomes a very, very integral part of a stormwater fee program and supporting a stormwater fee being assessed. So all of that to say, basically, you want to have a good, hard conversation about what it is you want to use the data for, and then that's going to guide you as to what level of detail it is you're going to need to collect when you're out there in the field. Now, you can collect at a lower level and certainly go back in the future and add more to it. That's the nice thing about GIS. It's very scalable. It's very easy to come back. But certainly anybody from the GIS side will tell you, you want to make sure that you're being smart about how you set your model up, about how you set your mapping up, so that you don't get yourself kind of painted into a corner and then you kind of diminish your ability to be scalable with it. So next slide, please. So what can a GIS mapping solution do for me? And obviously, we're going to kind of hit these first two pretty hard because that's really the focus of what our presentation is. But BMP location and tracking and IDDE and mitigation. So those are the two that have those direct ties to your MS4 program. And those are two that I think the GIS mapping solution is the right size tool. I think it can provide the value that kind of justifies the investment in it. But aside from that, as I've said, there are other things you can do with it. You don't have to stop there. And these other items that are listed here, they are ones that with the Borough of Hanover, we're either already do these things or we're in the process of doing these things. So it can assist you with your asset management, with your maintenance prioritization. And I've got a slide that we'll kind of look at with that. It can help you with your flood modeling. So if you're a community that experiences a lot of flooding, you know, and you want to understand better why it's flooding, and more so, you want to understand what do I need to do to mitigate that flooding, having a good GIS solution can actually help you with that. And we'll look a little bit at that too. Water quality modeling, that's one we're just now starting to play with a little bit, but you can look at your modeling to help with the GIS to say, okay, where can I expect that I'm going to potentially have water quality issues? You know, where might I see if I have a spill in a certain area, where can I expect that might end up downstream? And then finally, public engagement. You know, nowadays with the advent of social media and websites and all of these other things, you can use GIS as actually a public engagement tool. And so that same tool you're using for your BMP location and your illicit discharge and detection, you can use the public and actually kind of double up on the benefits, because now you can start to meet some of your other MCM obligations by using that outreach and engaging that public to help you meet your MS4 obligations. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the BMP location and tracking and how specifically GIS can assist you. So one of the very first things is it allows for easy field access. And so what I mean by that is you can go out with your map, and once you've kind of mapped where everything's at, you've provided that level of attribution that you wanted, whether, you know, it might be for BMPs, it could just be as simply as knowing they're there, or you could be a bit more robust and say, okay, I want to know they're there, but I want to know some information about them. I want to take this data that I've got sitting here in my office, and I want to have that be something that when I'm in the field, I have access to that. And so one of the things you can do is tie that data to your GIS mapping so that you can click on that dot that represents a rain garden or represents a bioretention basin. You can click on it, you can pull it up and say, oh, cool, I can see when it was last inspected. I can see who owns this thing. You know, is it something we own? Is it something that is privately owned? You can do all kinds of really neat things, but the point with this first bullet point is it gives you absolute easy clicking access to that data. You don't need to rummage through files. You don't need to make yourself a post-it in the field, then go back to the office and try to find that information. You can actually manage all of that through your GIS solution. The other thing it can help you do is it can help you manage your inspection program. So it can help you with sending notices. It can help you with managing compliance. One of the things that we use it for here in the borough specifically is it helps me weed out who's inspected their BMPs and who hasn't. And then we can use that for a very targeted effort to push out notices to those owners to say, hey, you know, you're on our books as owning a BMP. You're also on our books as having obligations to maintain that BMP. And we're giving you notice that, you know, we took a look at our records and it's been, you know, 5 years or 3 years or 2 years or whatever. It's been a certain number of years since you last did an inspection. Please complete the attached inspection form and send it back to us. And then as they send it back, we can go into the GIS map and put the date that we received that updated inspection, and now they kind of fall off that list. So it can help you do very targeted inspection. It can help you kind of engage that public again. They're not going to remember when they last inspected it. Most of them aren't even going to remember that they have a BMP out there in the field anyway. That's one of the biggest problems with stormwater programs is understanding those obligations, understanding that they even have a facility that needs to be maintained. But if you can send them a notice and you can send them a screenshot of the actual map that says, not only are you up for an inspection, but hey, I'll help you. Here's where the BMP is and here's what it is. That helps them also to kind of refresh their memory on it. And then finally, enabling efficient reporting. The nice thing about this is then when you go to do that annual report, you can use this as a tool. You can go into GIS and pull out all of those, you know, BMP inspection reports that are part of your obligations under MS4 and say, okay, you know, I don't want to sift through a bunch of manila folders to find out who submitted what and when they submitted it. I can go into the GIS thing, run a simple query and say, look, pull out for me all the inspection reports, all of the properties that hadn't inspected in the last 5 that we sent notices to, you know, pull all of those out and print those for me, and it can do that. So that's one of the nice things is certainly, and you know, we have a very small staff in the borough, so I don't have a lot of extra hands that I can have somebody doing a lot of in-depth, exhaustive researching of who's inspected and things. So to have this ability, GIS can make it easy is really worth the value for me. Next slide, please. From the standpoint of illicit discharge and detection, just a whole myriad of different things that it can help you with. So the first of which, it allows for real-time and reporting of incidents. And what I mean by that is you can actually create a sort of outward-facing engagement portal with your website, through your social media or other things, where you can have your public engage you to say, hey, I was down there on Smith Street and I noticed purple liquid going down the curb, and that didn't seem right to me, so I want to bring it to your attention. And having them have the ability to see a map and see, perhaps locate for you physically where that's at, can just cut through a lot of it, because they might say, I saw it on Smith Street. You may not know exactly where that's at. And so it allows you to get that information from the public. That's something we're not doing currently right now, but we actually just revamped our website, and it's on my to-do list. One of the things I want to do is look to integrate the GIS mapping and things we're already doing, integrate those into our website so that we have that ability to engage the public. The second bullet point is really one that we do actually do in the borough. It improves on collaboration between the departments. So what we have done is we have given access to our mapping, to our public works, to our emergency services, to our codes enforcement groups, because we find that they are the ones who are out there in the field most of the given workday, and sometimes, especially with emergency service, even after hours. They're the ones that are out there who might be responding to a car accident, and maybe you got a car and it's got a busted radiator and you got oil. Having them be able to see where that system is, where are the points it can enter the system, but specific to this presentation today, where are those points where it can find its way out of our system and unfortunately into the waterways. Because every second counts in those situations. And if your emergency services have the ability to not only say, oh, I know exactly where that outfall is going to be, to go down there and put the mitigation measures in place, whether it's booms or absorbent or whatever, that's going to help mitigate that getting into and having an adverse impact on the waterway. That's very, very important. And so having the collaboration ability, this map brings all those departments together, is just really, really where you want to be with that. Streamlines discharge source tracing. Kind of a complicated way to say, basically, you can find out where it came from. And the slide to the right there, this image is actually very specifically, I chose this one because actually last year when we were doing some of our outfall screening, the area below that, it looks like a bunch of buildings there, there's an outfall right there. Yep, Nathan's kind of circling around it there. So that was an outfall. We were out there just doing our sort of methodic searching of outfalls, popped up on this one, and noticed that there was actually a bunch of cloudy water, and there was actually some toilet paper in there. And certainly that is the absolute function of why EPA and DEP want you to do outfall screenings. That wasn't something that had been reported. It wasn't something that was on anybody's radar. The outfall seems like it's fairly visible there, but actually it's kind of obscured by some trees and some private properties there. It wasn't really on our radar. We rolled up to do the normal screening, saw it, and immediately kind of switched out of the outfall screening mode and into source tracing. Where is it coming from? We need to find out immediately, where is that, the source of that? And instead of just kind of randomly looking around in inlets and walking through neighborhoods, we were able to pull up the mapping and see specifically where that trunk of storm line was coming from. And actually, to the second bullet point below this, what we were then able to do also was we kind of overlaid our sewer map on top of this. And now we had an instant view. I mean, we saw the toilet paper, so we had a pretty good idea of what the cause was. But by laying the sewer on top of it, we were able to look at connections. We were able to look at sewer lines. We were able to then go to the second bullet point there and collaborate with our public works, and specifically for us, what we call our I&I crew, but our sanitary sewer crew. We were able to engage them very quickly to say, look, we've got an issue out here. We know the nature of it, but we need your help to look at things. They were able to go out on site very quickly, get the camera truck out there. We actually pushed cameras up through the storm sewer line. Lo and behold, we actually found an illicit connection that had been made to the storm line, and we were able to approach the owner and say, hey, actually, we got a connection here. You got to get that cut off. And within 24 hours time, we were able to have that basically capped off, and then work with that owner to get that replumbed to somewhere else. So that was something where the power of GIS kind of enabled us us to make very quick decisions, to make very strategic decisions, and to avoid a lot of time where we were just kind of walking around neighborhoods looking in inlets saying, you know, hey, any toilet paper in here? Nope. Okay. Anything here? You know, we were able to engage the right people in the conversation and really address the issue at hand. It expedites MS4 reporting and screening. Again, if we can kind of combine these last two bullet points here, but if we can actually engage the public in some of that reporting, if we give them a tool to say, hey, I was down here on the end of the street, looked at that, and actually, I don't know if you knew this or not, but we saw some toilet paper down there, you know, we can very quickly then respond to that. And then also it helps us to be able to meet our MS4 obligations, because now I can tag an incident report to that outfall also, so that when I do my annual screenings and reportings for the annual report, everything is right there in one place. So the IDDE and mitigation part of this is really, there's a lot of value in it, a lot of value not just for meeting your obligations, but as Nathan started off this presentation saying, our goal at the end of this is clean water. It's water quality. That's what we're after. And if this platform can help you understand your system, that really propels you towards better being able to respond to water quality issues. Next slide. So getting a little bit aside, again, some of those parallel benefits that we can see, this is actually a screenshot from the way that we look at it from an asset management maintenance prioritization tool. And so what we do here for stormwater is we've used that map that we've already built in the MCM3 program. We use that exact same mapping, but we're also now we're kind of ratcheting it up. And so when we looked at that one slide that said, all right, what else do you want to use this for? We checked the box to say we want to use this for an asset management program. So not only do I want to know where those outfalls are, not only do I want to know how it fits into the scheme of things, I want to go in there and actually take this from just being a dot on a map that shows me it's an inlet, and I want to start to build what we call attribution. I want to add attributes to my data field, like what size of inlet is it? What type of inlet is it? You can see by this picture here, we actually take, you know, photographs of it so that I can sit here at my desk and understand what that looks like. The reason all of this is relative is when you start talking about a maintenance program, you know, and especially if you already have a fee program in place, like the Borough of Hanover has right now, you want to make sure that every dollar you're spending on maintenance or, you know, replacing infrastructure or upgrading and repairing infrastructure, you want to make sure all of that is very methodic and has sort of a backlog of data that supports it. You don't want to just be out there randomly replacing pipes. You know, that's okay to kind of jump around and respond to that sort of squeaky wheel, respond to that person who says, oh, hey, just so you know, this pipe's flooding. But what I always advocate is you want to have a more robust sort of strategic approach to how you're doing those pipes and inlets and things like that. GIS, with the tools you're building under MCM3 for illicit discharge, for BMP tracking, can be that same platform for you. Next slide. So this is the really cool spot that the borough is working on now. And so we're actually now kind of actively engaged in taking our mapping and starting to integrate it with our flood management program. And so we're starting to use it to help educate our decisions on, aside from just an asset management and a maintenance thing, where should we be making investments in improving flooding situations? And so what we've done is we've actually taken the GIS model that we've built and we've actually integrated that into hydraulic and hydrologic modeling to help us understand where are flooding areas and what can we do about them. Now, certainly, as you know, the public is very much, you know, they love to come in and tell you, you know, hey, you got flooding on the street. And a lot of times, unfortunately, your answer is, yeah, I'm aware, I know what's going on. It's a much better conversation to be there to say, yep, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of how frequently it happens. I'm aware of how deep it happens. And I'm also aware of how we go about developing a solution to deal with it. And so this is actually a slide that we took. So we divided the borough into 3 major watersheds. This is actually from one of the first ones that we did and finished last year. This was one that we had worked integrally with Penn Township on. One of our watersheds in this first one actually spilled over into Penn Township, and so we worked with them to bring their GIS data and our GIS data together. If you'll remember, one of the things I said is collaboration is a big key to this whole thing. So we were able to kind of meld those together, understand where the flooding is, and now we can run desktop scenarios to say, okay, what if we put a 15-inch pipe in? What if we put a 24-inch pipe in? What if we put 2 pipes in? And we can rerun the models to see whether we're going to get that return on investment versus just simply going out there. And the old adage was just make the pipe bigger. Well, maybe you made it an 18-inch and it might resolve some of the flooding, but you come to find out it doesn't resolve enough of it that it was worth the investment. So the key thing on this is that this is a really valuable, and especially in today where we see a lot of flooding, having the data you've already built for your MCM3 can help educate your decisions on flood modeling. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Nathan, just to kind of wrap things up, and then certainly from there we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, so I remember 20 years ago when I first heard what an MS4 was. I'm like, you're gonna make municipalities do what? You're gonna make them map their system. I remember going to the County Planning Commission and seeing a map of the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system on the wall. I'm like, that's important. But you want to see what a stormwater system looks like. It's spread out across the landscape. That's crazy. And you're gonna make every municipality do that. You're gonna make everybody put a map together that shows where their stormwater system is. That's a big undertaking. So here we are 20 years later, right? And it makes sense for water quality to know how to track back what comes out the pipe. If you've got an illicit discharge, it makes sense to have that map now, know where the outfalls are so you can look at it. But I think what we're seeing is municipalities saying we do need to start treating our storm sewer system like we treat our sanitary system, like we treat our water distribution system. We need to know a little bit more about it. And Eric went through some real life examples of what they're doing in Hanover Borough, of how they're using that base map that DEP said, know where your outfalls are so you can take care of water quality, and move that on to asset management, move that on to flood modeling. Use that map as the foundation for some of the other things that are the business of municipal government, of protecting against flooding, making sure you're making the right investment in infrastructure. And so that you can communicate your priorities, you communicate your goals to the public so that they're clear on why are you making this investment? Where is our money going? How are you addressing flooding? How are you complying with DEP? So I think in the last 20 years, from just getting the map, I think you can start to see there are some ways that mapping really helps municipalities do the business of municipal government in infrastructure and flooding. So we're around, I guess we've got 8 or 9 minutes for Q&A, and we'll pass it back to the moderators to take it from there.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Nathan. It's very interesting. I love the focus on the integration and how it's not just an investment for minimum control measure 3 and just IDDE, but how it can inform so many other aspects of water quality management that you're doing at the local level. While people have the opportunity to type their questions into the chat, I had one for all of you. Eric, you had mentioned that the mapping really helps with coordination and collaboration among the departments. And I was wondering if you give them training on how to use the GIS, and if you talk to them about, what IDDE is. So what kind of training goes along with other departments that aren't your stormwater folks?
Yes, that's a great question. So we actually, there is a little bit of a training aspect that you have to do to it. You certainly, you can't hand those crews a tablet and say, okay, here's where you log in and, happy hunting. You got to give them a little bit of understanding. Now, what is nice specifically for the borough is they understand GIS mapping already because we've drilled that into them from the water and the sanitary sewer side. So we also, in addition to our stormwater mapping, we certainly use the ArcGIS platform to manage all of our sanitary sewer, to manage all of our water infrastructure. And by doing that, you've already kind of knocked down that sort of apprehension level with them. They're used to that level of mapping. They're used to navigating around maps. They're used to clicking on elements on a map to get information about things. So there wasn't a whole lot of training effort to kind of get them up to speed with the stormwater. But there is, what I'm going to say is really an ongoing effort to have them understand a little bit of why we care about certain things, and specific to the IDDE program, why is it important that we pay attention when we're driving around and see things, to, not to steal the Homeland Security, but see something, say something, is, we need them to don't just drive past that green substance going down the sidewalk, or don't just drive past it and assume that somebody else is going to take care of it. If you've got the ability to have the mapping, they can come back to our office, to our department in planning engineering, and say, hey guys, notice it was here, pulled it up on the map, it looks like it's headed down to outfall, XYZ. And then that allows us to engage the right people in the conversation, whether it's us, whether we actually go ahead and get the emergency management folks involved in it. But it allows us then to get engaged in it. So that's an ongoing thing. That's not something you change overnight, because some of that is a behavior change also. But yeah, you do have to engage them, and you do have to educate them if you're going to be successful with it.
Great, thanks. I had one other question. How many FTEs did it take for you in the borough to get all of the various assets of the MS4 mapped? We heard in the last sessions in February of a municipality that used a high school intern to get it done.
Yeah.
What sort of FTEs did you use for that effort?
So we had hired initially, the borough had hired an intern. The intern came in and did a lot of that preliminary mapping and kind of the attribution and things. We worked with a third party to kind of help build the platform and kind of oversee that daily data collection. And then what has happened is actually it's an ongoing effort. Certainly we mapped everything. It's probably, I want to say it's probably been about, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think, when the effort started. And I would tell you we're probably not done, because what I find a lot is we get out in the field, we start looking things. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that pipe actually goes a little different direction, or, that's since been rebuilt or rehabbed and now it goes this way, or now the attributes are slightly different. So it can take a long time. Building the basis is probably the key thing. Get as accurate as you can get initially, but understand that you might not do that in a Friday afternoon. It is going to take some period of time. I think using interns, especially those from GIS-based education programs, they're always looking for projects, real-world projects that they can get engaged in collecting data and understanding and getting comfortable with the GIS environment. That's a really good idea, but it can boil down to, you can get high school students, you can get students who might be looking for, it's a Girl Scout project, it's a Boy Scout project, something like that. It's not a high level of training you have to give them for just the basic data collection. So you can get those people engaged, and then the investment long term is probably, it's your regular staff to kind of keep things. One last point on that we do also is, when we get new developments that come in and say, hey, I want to build this new development and we're going to have, all these new inlets and piping, as opposed to going out there and actually collecting that in real time, what we will do then is, as part of the plan approval process, when we're done, we actually ask for the CAD files from those developers, and then we can bring that CAD file directly into our mapping and land it on top of, and then kind of just clean it up, versus going out there and trying to attribute everything in the field. So you can change some of your policies to also help you keep your map up to date.
That's a really great idea. That's a really, really useful lesson learned that other folks can apply. Yep. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I think you guys were so thorough. You answered everything everyone would want to know. So I guess if there are no other questions, we have about 2 minutes left in this session. What I would say is, we'll be leaving this session, going back to the main plenary, and then going into our subsequent breakouts. So if everyone could show a little love to our presenters, Nathan and Eric, either, thumbs up in the chat. Yeah, there's some applause coming through. So, and they have their contact information up there. So if you do have questions you don't want to ask here, take advantage of those emails and shoot them a message. So thanks so much, Eric and Nathan, again, for your time. That was really informative and thorough. We appreciate it. And if there's nothing else, we can go ahead and leave this session and we'll see you all in the main plenary.
All right, thanks for having
And
us.
Liz has put the link to that day one link back into the comments for everybody. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in another session.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.